When Victor Charles was 15 years old in 1954, as a sophomore at St. Augustine High School, he was over 6 foot tall and weighed nearly 300 pounds. He was unique in stature and he was incredibly intelligent and perceptive of people. While growing up, it was no secret that his male peers were treated differently than him, and how the young girls looked at them, but never at him. He was physically different, and he knew it. He couldn't keep from seeing the young girls' eyes staring at the handsome, slim boys who most likely played athletic sports, and he must have perceived the differences, and knowing the young girls would never look at him quite that way, too. It is natural for humans to want to be admired and wanted, and especially when it comes to sexuality. Victor Charles may have come to an early conclusion, knowing even though girls didn't find him that attractive, his inner yearning for intimacy may have chosen another course in wanting to be sexually aroused with young men instead. Young men at the age of 15 years old contemplate on sexuality all the time because it is a natural human element for being alive. Masturbation is always a first choice for many young men, and as for Victor Charles, at one point in his early life, may have had a sexual episode with another boy friend, and that isn't unrealistic or wrong, because it happens every day of the year, and has been for numerous centuries from the very beginning. Here are a few homosexuals that enchanted the world. Composers Aaron Copland, Leonard Bernstein, Elton John, and playwrights like Tennessee Williams, Noel Coward, Oscar Wilde, and actors too like Montgomery Clift, Charles Laughton, and Ian McKellen, and numerous others. They all were gay at some time in their lives, bisexually loving men instead of women, and they did quite well, and today are all considered legends within their arts. The names of these talented and creative giants of the arts should be greatly appreciated for what they have given to mankind. None of them are no lesser because of whom they brought into their beds. Whether my uncle Victor Charles was gay or not, it doesn't matter, because he still remains being a creative gem. And if he was born gay, he will always be cherished for centuries to come. Victor Charles was learning acting at St. Augustine High School and soon performing on the San Diego Junior Theater stage. He was in two of their productions, being Aladdin and playing in the role of the evil magician on October 16, 1954, and in Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates in the role of Dr. Popman on November 13, 1954. The Buono family never had it any better than in 1954, when they could step out of their front door and within seconds be standing in the water of Mission Bay. Their home was directly across from the Bahia Hotel, where an old Mississippi riverboat was docked. There were small sailboats and motorboats and water skiers being pulled across the bay, and with seagulls flying in the sky overhead looking for crumbs of food on the sand. This was the paradise I knew when growing up there and playing in the sand with my two sisters and my Uncle David Francis. Granny Grunts and Grandma Mert would be sitting in the kitchen, talking and laughing and cooking the greatest French fries in the entire whole world. Victor Charles was always a blur, popping in and out of that beach house door, being here, there, and everywhere with his friends and theatrical productions. He was never one to be sitting lazily around doing nothing, because his intellect and amazing energy would never allow him to do anything like that. Victor Charles' future lifetime friend, Peggy Kellner, set a record with the UA Drama Awards on May 18, 1954. Not only one, but she won 3 drama awards that year at the University of Arizona. Later in the year, Peggy Kellner's name was in a newspaper on November 7, 1954, announcing she was the assistant director in the production of Arthur Miller's fantastic Death of a Salesman. And the leading actor in the character of Willie Loman was my future mentor, Martin Garish. His acting credits were superb, especially when he played at the leading role of Father Keno in the dramatic production of The Bell and the Plow. I was overwhelmed finding out that Peggy Kellner and Martin Garish had worked together at the University of Arizona and were dear friends who would soon meet up with my Uncle Victor Charles in the near future at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, California. Before I started writing this book, I had no idea that my mentor Martin Garish in the 1990s had met and worked with Peggy Kellner in 1954. It caught me by surprise how fate works in our lives by crossing people's paths. I will now add Martin Garish in this story of Victor Charles's life. In 2007, I wrote my book about my theater experiences titled The Manhattan Playhouse, Beyond the Odds, describing the many plays I had acted in and directed throughout my career there. This is what I wrote about Martin Garish when I first met him. My first introduction to Martin took place in 1990, when I stopped over at the Grove Playhouse, where he had just established within the last year. I was told by other actors within San Diego that he was the one director you wanted to work with. Once informed and seeking to learn from the best, I opened the front doors to the theater and entered into the foyer. Immediately, my attention was drawn to my left, and there, standing in front of the Gertrude Stein set, was open-jaw actress Pat Melke and Martin Garish. He was tall, sophisticated, and a seasoned veteran of the stage, and he was glaring at me, and his facial expression said it all, as if saying, "What the hell do you want? Can't you see we're rehearsing?" I promptly spoke my intentions about wanting to work at his theater, and he then gruffly hurried me on my way, saying, "Come another day when we're not rehearsing." I vividly recall feeling slightly humiliated by his response, but I also felt invigorated in knowing I had just met a true man of the theater who didn't mince words at all. I soon returned thereafter, and I'm glad that I did. My association with Martin Garish soon became an experience of my lifetime. Before Victor Charles met his future agent in Hollywood, Jerry Rosen had sued a Broadway comedian over a World Series bet. Rosen was smart and streetwise, and he knew what paths to take in swampy Hollywood. On March 17, 1954, Jerry Rosen had a heart attack, but he luckily survived to meet young Victor Charles later in the early 1960s. I have introduced a number of important individuals in Victor Charles' life who soon became his friends and creative allies. He would soon meet his mentor, Greg Noe, at the Oak Globe Theater, and he already met his mentor, Father John R. Ahern, at St. Augustine High School. He would soon be meeting costume designer Peggy Kellner and actor Jonathan McMurtry. We're now entering the year of 1955, and the three infamous names Jack Dragna, Frank Bonserio, and Tony Mirabile would change my step-grandfather Victor Francis's life and have him going down a darkened path while Victor Charles was soon to become a Hollywood star. My uncle Victor Charles was 16 years old in 1955, and he was in the 11th grade at St. Augustine High School. My father Sonny was 27 years old, and he left the La Mesa Police Department and soon became a San Diego County Sheriff. David Francis was 8 years old, and Uncle Tony was 13 years old, and the Buono family was still living at 3266 Bayside Walk. I was 2 years old, and my half-sister, Teresa Ann, was now going to Johnson Avenue Elementary School. That was only 5 blocks away from our house. As I grew older, I spent my summers in the El Cajon Theater, watching motion pictures of the Three Stooges, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, and Elvis Presley. In Tucson, Arizona, at the Lyric Theater, Peggy Kellner was directing No Cowards' production, Blithe Spirit, on February 20, 1955. She would soon be meeting Victor Charles in the following year. On July 20th, 1955, Peggy Kellner was now employed at the Oak Globe Theater. She was then working closely with founder and director Craig Noe, and they were staging the San Diego National Shakespearean Festival, with 3 productions being Measure for Measure, Hamlet, and The Taming of the Shrew. My mentor, Martin Garish, won the National Collegiate Players honor, tying with actor-director Peter Maroney when performing in the role as Willie Loman in The Death of a Salesman at the University of Arizona. Garish was a fabulous actor, director, and teacher of theater throughout his theatrical career. He once had his name in the New York Times in August of 1955 when he played in the lead role of playwright Paul Green's production of Lost Colony in Virginia. They also printed a photo of him, which turned out to be a great memento for him. In October, Garish and Maroney worked together on the very same production of The Remarkable Mr. Pennypacker, written by Liam O'Brien, and Garish was the assistant director. When I first met Martin Garish, his acting days had slowed down a bit, but he was still known as one of the best directors in San Diego. Bette Davis came back to the silver screen in 1955 in the motion picture The Virgin Queen, starring Richard Todd and Joan Collins. It was filmed by 20th Century Fox and was released on July 22nd, 1955. We can't ignore Joan Crawford coming out with two motion pictures in 1955 with Female on the Beach, starring Jeff Chandler and Jan Sterling. It was filmed by Universal Pictures and it was released on August 19, 1955. Her second motion picture was Queen Bee, starring John Arlen and Betsy Palmer. It was filmed by Columbia Pictures and it was released on November 7, 1955. During the early year of 1955, there were darkening clouds hanging overhead of the Buono house. Soon, it came knocking on the door at 3266 Bayside Walk. Was an alarming wake-up for my step-grandfather, Victor Francis, and his family. He was indicted for smuggling exotic birds and parrots from Mexico. It's hard to imagine what my father Sonny must have thought when going to work downtown as a San Diego County sheriff. My father's last name is Erreca, but not Buono. That at least gave him shelter from being tagged as the stepson of Victor Francis Buono. When my two sisters, Teresa and Renee, and I, were growing up in 1955, there wasn't a single word ever mentioned to us about this crushing episode with our step-grandfather, Victor Francis. I'm confident that my Grandma Mert had a few words to share with her husband, but nothing was ever spoken to us. Victor Charles was 16 years old, Tony Edwards was 13 years old, and David Francis was 8 years old when this situation came crashing down on everyone's heads. At the beginning of May in 1955, everything looked pretty good when living near South Mission Beach, and with Victor Francis owning his own bills bond business in downtown San Diego. Victor Charles was doing well at St. Augustine High School, and he was learning the art of becoming an actor. There was a new reality that kicked open the doors in late May of 1955, making everyone's lives not as comfortable as it was before. There was a barrage of newspaper clippings following the bird smuggling indictments on June 4, 1955, where 3 names were printed: Clifford Duke, Louis Glenn Ballard, and my step-grandfather, Victor Francis Buono. With my step-grandfather, Victor Francis's name in the newspapers, it must have paid a heavy toll on his son Victor Charles's emotions. This might be the reason why he didn't perform in any plays throughout 1955. I just can't imagine how difficult it must have been for Victor Charles to go to school knowing his peers might know about what his father had done. The evidence was growing against Victor Francis and the other 2 men, and I haven't found out any clear information of what month or year that Victor Francis lost his ownership of his bail bonds business, but it could have happened much later, around 1958. Most importantly, what was going on within the Buono family in late 1955? Was my grandparents' marriage in jeopardy over that recent smuggling debacle? How did this influence Victor Charles and David Francis and the rest of the entire family members? When I was growing up, my father Sonny and my mother Hilda continued taking my 2 sisters and me to visit with our Buono family. To us, everything seemed completely natural while we played on the sand in Mission Bay at the beach. There was Granny Grunt sitting in the kitchen with Grandma Mert, and we smelled food cooking on the stove, and with Victor Charles darting in and out of the house, and eventually leaving somewhere with his friends that only God knows. It was like nothing ever happened to Victor Francis, to our young ears and eyes. We just didn't know what happened to the Buono house then. There was a great news within the Buono house on Wednesday, June 6, 1956, when Victor Charles was 17 years old and was a valedictorian at St. Augustine High School. On that day, Father John R. Ahern honored all of the graduates, and Victor Charles shared these few words to his graduating class of 1956, saying, "Our sword is a knowledge, and there is no knowledge that is not power." Another chapter in Victor Charles's life was his lasting friendship with Peggy Kellner. You will be reading about her many accomplishments and giving you an idea of the talented people who surrounded Victor Charles's early career as an actor. The Old Globe Theatre costume designer Peggy Kellner recalled Victor Charles when he first started acting there in 1956. In the Ranch and Coast magazine in April 27th, 2015, Peggy Kellner quoted, "When Victor Buono first started at the Globe, I told him he had to learn to paint and sew because he wasn't going to be just an actor. He learned to run the sewing machines and used to make hats. When he did Threepenny Opera, he came down and said, 'You need help?' And I said, 'Of course.' I was wood graining the set, using those thick black felt-tip pen on everything. Furniture, the doors, the set, the floor, everything. I got him started on that, and he was there for 2 days wood graining everything he could get his hands on. He'd come in and out during the Shakespeare, and he'd work on shoes or make hats, leaving little notes tucked away for the actors to get. This was specially worked on for you by Victor Buono." We had a great deal of fun with him. Many years later, in 1990, when I first met my mentor, Martin Garish, at the Grove Playhouse, he too did exactly what Victor Charles did by putting his hands to work in building sets, painting walls, wood graining furniture, repairing shoes, costumes, and hats. Both Buono and Garish were taught by Peggy Kellner to be more than just being actors or directors if you wanted a rich and long life in theater. Garish was part of the Oak Globe Theatre family of Craig Knoll and Peggy Kellner. In 1956, he had the leading role of a U.S. Army officer, Hero, in the stage production of Voice in the Wind at the Ruskin Theater in Tucson, Arizona. And he had a small part in the motion picture The Bottom of the Bottle, starring Van Johnson and Joseph Cotten, filmed by 20th Century Fox Studios. He also directed the light comedy production Jane by S.N. Berman in January 27, 1956. We're now moving into 1957, and if you thought 1956 was chaotic and unbelievable, it only gets more perplexing with every word. Victor Charles was on the rise after winning his first Globe Atlas Award for Best Actor, and it would change his acting future substantially. Victor Charles was 18 years old and had more confidence after graduating from St. Augustine High School and having been chosen valedictorian that year in 1956. At this point in time, his theatrical body of work was Aladdin and Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates at the San Diego Junior Theater in 1954. Come slowly Eden, Hamlet, and Barrett's of Wimpole Street at the St. Augustine High School in 1955, and Midsummer Night's Dream, King Richard II, and Vaupoon at the Oak Globe Theater in 1956. Victor Charles had received a scholarship to Villanova University in Pennsylvania. As far as I know, he only attended there for a short time. I contacted Villanova University to find out his records when he was there and when he left, but they wouldn't release any dates to me at all. There is a photo of Victor Charles at Villanova University when he was 18 years old. It was his Villanova University student class photo of 1957, and when closely looking at Victor Charles's facial expression, he didn't appear to be very happy, and that may have been the reason why he didn't continue staying there. This was the first time Victor Charles lived away from his family, friends, and the Oak Globe Theater. By being away from his two mentors, Father John R. Ahern and director Craig Noe, this might have been the reason he wanted to return to San Diego, California, after all. After winning the Atlas Globe Award in 1956, he probably realized that he didn't really want to be at Villanova University to become a Catholic priest or medical doctor, but instead he wanted to be an actor. After hearing the applause of a satisfied audience and having his name printed in a newspaper theater review, he knew he wanted to perform and hear laughter for the rest of his life. He soon enrolled in the University of San Diego in 1957, and there are several photos of him in the school album that year. He performed in the production of Jenny Missed Me, and it was staged at the Puppet Theater in Balboa Park in May of 1957. Then on April 14th, 1957, he was performing in the production of The Betrayal at the Balboa Park Organ Pavilion. As the last days, weeks, and months went by in 1957, Victor Francis only could hope that 1958 would bring better days for him and to his family. But in his case, wishful thinking went the other way. The year of 1958 finally came, and Betty Davis and Joan Crawford were hoping their careers would be longer and better as they both aged when looking in their mirrors. Frank Sinatra had thrown his lucky dices for a long period of time, and he made it clear that no one better stand in his way for success. Dean Martin was feeling pretty good by the way he acted in his recent motion pictures, and he was praising the Almighty that he didn't have to drag Jerry Lewis around anymore. When 1958 came, Betty Davis and Joan Crawford always dreaded the day that it would come. Both of them didn't have a single motion picture on the silver screens that year. And everyone, and even Wall Street, should have known something horrible was brewing behind the scenes. Here is a personal recollection I once heard from my Uncle Tony about the relationships he saw and heard when living within the Buono house. The only reason why I'm writing this is to hopefully help us to understand who Victor Charles truly was when he was alive. It may be a clue into his character and behavior, or it might only be nothing at all. My Uncle Tony had once told me on April 3rd, 2007, that Victor Charles was afraid of his father, Victor Francis, due to his abuse to his mother. To be fair to my step-grandfather, Victor Francis, my Uncle Tony didn't describe the severity of abuse he might have given to my Grandma Mert. I would like to think it was only verbal abuse instead of being physical, but even with that, Victor Charles may have been fearful of him throughout his entire life. I turned 5 years old on September 24th, 1958, and it was the year that I started remembering images of the Buono house near South Mission Beach. Victor Francis was 50 years old and Grandma Mert was 48. My father Sonny was 30 and my mother Hilda was still in her 20s at 26. Victor Charles was 19, his younger brother David Francis was 11, and Tony was 16 and going to La Jolla High School. My sister Teresa was 9 and Renee was 6 years old. I loved visiting with my Buono family and playing under the sun, on the sand, and in the water of Mission Bay in front of their house. If you ran out of their front door, you would be in the bay within 10 seconds. My young ears were always acute to hearing crackling laughter and passionate, salty verbiage stories spewing out of my Granny Grunt's mouth. There was electricity in the air when visiting the Buono house, and to this very day, I credit them for making me become an actor from their dramatic tones and crackling, funny stories. My step-grandfather, Victor Francis, continued having men who wore suits and hats visiting his house, and I always wondered who they were. And later in my life, my father Sonny told me that they were members of the Matranga family. It was commonly known that the Matrangas were associates with San Diego boss Tony Mirabile. I was always treated nicely from these men, and they were like uncles of the family, and my step-grandfather, Victor Francis, took me and my 2 sisters across Mission Boulevard to Belmont Park, where the roller coaster ride was overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It seems so normal in those days when thinking back on them. Some people might say my step-grandfather, Victor Francis, easily got off the hook by smuggling parakeets and parrots from Mexico. He definitely dodged that particular debacle. But if he had only refrained from taking further steps down his darkened path, his life would have been all the better for him and his family. During 1958, Victor Francis owed a fine of $5,000, which is equivalent to being $44,231.16 at today's standards, and he was placed on a 3 years probation. He most likely lost his bail bonds business along the way, and he was facing an enormous financial challenge to survive and to provide for his family. At that point in time, he was living 73 miles north of San Diego in Paris, California. Obviously, there might have been a separation with my grandma Mert. 19 years old Victor Charles was studying at the University of San Diego, and he didn't act in any productions at the Old Globe Theater during 1958. 11 years old David Francis soon would be living at the Army and Navy Academy boarding school. My father Sonny was in his third year as being a San Diego County sheriff, and he was 30 years old, and he must have been greatly concerned about what was taking place in his mother's life. Throughout my entire early life, my father never described the many details of what was happening to his stepfather, Victor Francis, between the years of 1955 to 1958. It was a common practice within the whole family to keep secrets buried safely and out of sight. Within the culture of a mafia family, it teaches everyone to remain silent. What was taking place in 1958 was a crisis within the Buono family, and it was never discussed throughout my teenage years and onward. Not until I was much older when I discovered what truly had happened during that disastrous year. The future fates of Victor Francis and Victor Charles began on the evening of December 27, 1958, when Tony Mirabile was murdered. They soon were going in separate directions within their lives. When Victor Francis woke up on the following morning after Tony Mirabile was murdered, and he had a cup of coffee reading how he died, we can only imagine what must have been rushing through his head. He obviously must have hoped that none of his conspirators of murder would be discovered and arrested. He must have had great concerns about his missing gun that killed Mirabile, and was hoping it wouldn't be found by the police and investigators. Only Victor Francis knew the true reason why his conspirators went into Mirabile's apartment that night. Was it only to rob Tony Mirabile of his money, or was it an ordered hit by the mafia? My father Sonny told me long ago that he believed his stepfather, Victor Francis, was handed the black ball to knock off Tony Mirabile to shut his mouth. That, of course, doesn't hold any sure evidence to prove my father's opinion being true, one way or another. On December 30th, 1958, when Victor Francis knew the authorities had found his gun and he would be questioned by the police and investigators, he was smart enough to know that he was hanging by a thread and was only an inch away from being arrested for the murder of Tony Mirabile. When and what did Victor Francis talk about to my grandma Mert and his son Victor Charles about the possibilities of him going to prison for many years? First and foremost, financial concerns must have been discussed about how his family would survive if and when he might be incarcerated. My uncle David Francis was 11 years old, and his mother hadn't worked for a wage for probably over 20 years or more. The only family member that was old enough to earn a wage was 20 years old Victor Charles. But what could he do to earn enough money to provide for the Buono family? Victor Charles was only in his first stages of studying at the University of San Diego, and if his father, Victor Francis, went to prison, who would pay his tuition for college? Who would be paying the tuition for David Francis's boarding at the Army and Navy Academy School? They were still living at 3266 Bayside Walk. And who would pay the monthly electric bill, gas bill, taxes on the property or mortgages, food, and medical care? At this point in time, this was a financial crisis that had to be discussed within the family. During the months of December 30th, 1958 to February 3rd, 1959, Victor Francis had the opportunity to talk with mafia members who were connected in Hollywood that could possibly help his son, Victor Charles, to become a professional actor. It was Jack Warner and his right-hand man, William T. Orr, who eventually ushered Victor Charles into their studio for a film test in 1959, or earlier then. If money wasn't important for the Buono family in early 1959, then Victor Charles would have continued studying at the University of San Diego and working to get his college degree. I believe Victor Charles never had a job working for a wage as a waiter, cook, or any other type of employment anywhere by the time he had reached 20 years old. If and when Victor Francis, Grandma Merritt, and Victor Charles sat around their kitchen table to discuss what could be done for their financial future before Victor Francis might go to prison. Their dialogue might possibly have gone something like this. Listen to me. If I'm found guilty, I'll be sent to prison, and there won't be any money for you to go to college. Vic, do you understand that? Yes. You're 20 years old now, and you need to help around the house for your mother and little Davy. Do you have any ideas of what work you can do? I've never had a job. I don't know what to do. You can do anything, Vic. You're smart. You're a valedictorian. You can do anything. What kind of job do you want? I'll help you to find it. I've got connections around town. They don't pay you any money, though. I know that. You want to be an actor? Is that what you want to do, Vic? Yes. I can't be a waiter. I'd scare the customers half to death, thinking I was an elephant. You want an acting job, then? Yes. I have an idea, Vic. It's a long shot, but it's worth the try. I have friends in Hollywood. I have a few connections there. Look at me, Vic. Do you really want to be an actor? I guess. That's not good enough. How bad do you want it, Vic? Yes. It's all I want to do. Okay. I'll see what I can do for making you a professional actor. That is only one scenario of many that the Buono family might have talked about while facing their major crisis of losing everything they had built over their past 20 years. It's anyone's guess what they discussed during those desperate days, but it was a severe, concrete reality facing Victor Francis going to prison for many years. The newspapers throughout America were following these many updates of the death of Tony Mirabile, and they would keep coming out in black print practically every day of the week. Victor Charles was acting at the Old Globe Theatre during their Shakespearean Festival of 1959, and it is said that the talent scout Jerry Bloom from Warner Brothers was first to discover him playing Falstaff in Henry IV, Part 1, and he ushered him up to Hollywood. This is how Victor Charles's history is presented in current internet bios of how he supposedly first went up to Hollywood to become a television and motion picture actor. It's partially correct that Jerry Bloom did see him playing Falstaff that year, but the truth is, Victor Charles most likely had gone up to Hollywood before playing Falstaff in the Old Globe Theatre Shakespearean Festival of 1959. Victor Charles was an equity professional actor when playing Falstaff that year, and he had received his equity card in Hollywood before Jerry Bloom ever sat in a seat watching him playing Falstaff in 1959. I will explain more thoroughly on his rise up to Hollywood. It definitely wasn't Jerry Bloom who first sent him there, but it had to be others who truly put him onto a professional path to stardom in Hollywood. On July 5th, 1959, the Old Globe Theatre had their Shakespearean Festival employed with all professional equity acting company, and they never went back to their traditional non-equity status ever again. On August 11th, 1959, in the Los Angeles Times newspaper, it printed, "Romeo and Juliet Festival Highlight. For the first time in the festival's history, professional actors receiving Actors' Equity Scale from the strong nucleus of the casts, an arrangement made possible partially through a Ford Foundation grant. Most of the major roles in all three productions are assumed by this group of experienced performers who have Broadway and off-Broadway credits, as well as television background. Newest member of Actors' Equity in the company, 20 years old Victor Buono of San Diego, showed great promise in the widely varied roles of Falstaff, Prince of Verona, and Holofernes. The 8-week festival continues through August 30th. This is proof that Victor Charles was already a working professional actor when playing Falstaff in 1959. These are the plays Victor Charles performed before July 7th, 1959, when the Old Globe Theatre went equity. Aladdin in October 16, 1954, and Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates at the San Diego Junior Theater on November 13, 1954, Come Slowly, Eden, Hamlet, and the Barretts of Wimpole Street at St. Augustine High School in 1955, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Volpone at the Old Globe Theatre in 1956. Victor Charles was in The Betrayal and Jenny Kissed Me at the University of San Diego in 1957. Witness for the prosecution. The Tempest, King Lear, Knight of the Burning Pestle, and The Man Who Came to Dinner at the Old Globe Theatre in June 1957. Victor Charles might have gone up to Hollywood between December 30th, 1958 and April of 1959. He may have acted in at least 2 or more television programs at Warner Brothers within that time period in order to be given a SAG membership and an equity card before July 7th, 1959. So, the questions remain: who are the ones who are responsible for opening the doors for Victor Charles's rise up to Hollywood? There were only 3 men that I know of that had the capabilities of connecting Warner Brothers with Victor Charles between 1958 and 1959. Those 3 candidates are Victor Francis, Father John R. Ahern, and director Craig Knoll. I already said Victor Francis may have had connections with mafia members who could contact Warner Brothers to bring Victor Charles to Hollywood for a screen test in the months of 1958 and in early 1959. When Father John R. Ahern first heard about the crisis taking place in Victor Charles's family, he may have contacted various influential people who were connected to Warner Brothers. Putting it simply, Father John R. Ahern was Victor Charles's mentor, and he would have probably gone to any lengths to help the Buono family financial crisis. Father Ahern had connections in all corners of commerce throughout Southern California, and he most likely knew associates in Hollywood as well. Craig Knoll, the director of the Old Globe Theater, is the 3rd candidate who may have helped Victor Charles to become a professional actor. He was a soldier in World War II, and when the war ended, he was working for a short time at 20th Century Fox as a screen test director. On April 27, 2015, there was an article written in the Ranch and Coast magazine in San Diego about Craig Knoll's life, and it printed. Delza Martin, longtime Globe board member and active with the barn players that preceded the community theater, knew exactly who that director should be. She lost no time traveling with her husband to Los Angeles to persuade Knoll to return to the Globe as its artistic director. It wasn't easy to persuade Knoll. He was busy at 20th Century Fox, where as dialogue director he oversaw many screen tests, including the screen test of Marilyn Monroe and Shelley Winters. It was Craig Knoll, his mentor, who encouraged Victor Charles to act at the Old Globe Theater. In 1956, Victor Charles won the Globe Atlas Award for Best Actor of the Year in the production of Volpone. It is clear to me that when Craig Knoll may have read the newspaper on December 30th, 1958, and seen the name of Victor Francis Buono being a suspect to the murder of Tony Mirabile, he may have talked with Victor Charles immediately. Then, in hearing the financial crisis facing the Buono family, he possibly was the one who contacted Warner Brothers and other people he knew to get Victor Charles a screen test. Whoever it was who opened the door for Victor Charles to become a professional actor in Hollywood will most likely remain a secret of who was holding the golden key. I do know this: it wasn't the talent scout Jerry Bloom who discovered him, but it was probably one of these 3 most important men in his life who invested their talents and wisdom into making Victor Charles Buono a star in Hollywood.